Yo, what's up guys? Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to hit rank 1 with on the Arena ladder. As you can see from the screenshot here, I'm currently 67 and 9 with this deck, so it's been performing really well for me. And now before I get into it, there's going to be an MTGAzone link down in the description. If you click on that, it will have the full deck list there that you can import into Arena if you want to try the deck out for yourself. And I'm also in the process of writing a full text article about this deck for MTGAzone Premium that will have more details, a full sideboard guide, how I change the deck for best of one, and some tips and tricks to help you play the deck as well. So as soon as that's finished and up, I'll link that down in the description as well. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my Izzet Transmogrify control deck in Historic. So this is basically a control deck with a combo finish where we're trying to produce creature tokens and then target our own creature tokens with Transmogrify, which is guaranteed to cheat Atraxa into play because it's the only actual creature in the deck. So Atraxa is really nice because it refuels our hand, and then, you know, 7/7 with Flying Vigilance, Death Touch, Lifelink is really good at just closing the game out. You know, it puts the opponent on an immediate 3-turn clock, even if they haven't taken any damage. The Lifelink is really huge at stabilizing against aggressive decks as well. So the really nice thing about having this Transmogrify Atraxa package in a control deck is, first of all, it enables you to just close games out quickly. I think one of the biggest issues with control in Historic right now is there's such a high density of really powerful cards that can help the opponent get back into the game. Stuff like the One Ring, Collected Company, Chord of Calling, etc. is really good if the opponent gets time to top deck. So having a way to just put the opponent on an immediate 3-turn clock is really nice. And the other really nice thing about this is that it makes sideboarding against our deck very difficult, because we're running a general control deck. Outside of Transmogrify, we don't really care about single target creature removal like Fatal Push, but because Transmogrify into Atraxa is such a powerful play, the opponent, you know, basically has to keep in some single target removal, which is basically dead against us when we don't have Transmogrify. So those are two really nice upsides of running the package. Now, it might look really weird running Transmogrify when the general consensus is that Indomitable Creativity is the better card, but there's a few big reasons why I think in Historic I prefer running Transmogrify right now. So Creativity, you know, generally seen as the slightly better card because, first of all, you can target artifact tokens, which is generally safer than creature tokens because it's harder to interact with, you know, particularly with Orcish Bonemasters in the format right now. Using Transmogrify on 1/1 tokens is very risky, and Creativity can bypass that on artifact tokens. And then you also get the flexibility for going X=2 or higher if you have access to more mana as well. However, the main reasons why I'm much higher on Transmogrify right now, first of all, I think Transmogrify is much easier to cast. Single red as opposed to triple red means that in the mana base we can run way more colourless utility lands. Mutavault specifically is so good in this deck because it works really well with Transmogrify, Flame of Venor, and Retrofit Foundry. So if you're running Creativity, I really don't think you could afford to run the 4 Mutavault, as well as stuff like Otawara as well. So that's one upside. The second upside is that there are some new cards that work very well with Transmogrify, particularly Saruman's Trickery from the latest Lord of the Rings set is so good with Transmogrify because being able to counter something on turn 3, amass Orcs 1 to get a creature token, and then just go Transmogrify on turn 4. You know, likely if we're countering something on turn 3, the opponent's going to be tapped out, right? A lot of decks do tap out on turn 3 against you, playing stuff like Jarsul or, you know, any creature from Yawgmoth or Kethis or something like that. So countering something and creating an Orc into Transmogrify on turn 4 is such a sick curve out. And, you know, by extension, I think one of the big upsides of Transmogrify right now is that I just think the creature token generators are way better than the artifact token generators. You know, typically in Creativity decks and Historic in the past, the artifact generators you're looking to run are stuff like Big Score and Hard Evidence, both of which I think have become significantly worse since Orcish Bonemasters got added to the format. So typically, I think if you're running Creativity, you're probably going to be targeting creature tokens off stuff like Saruman's Trickery and Mutavault anyway. So because of the worse quality of the artifact token generators and the better quality of the creature token generators, I think Transmogrify has an edge there. And then in terms of Creativity being able to go for X=2 or higher, I just don't think there's better Creativity targets than Atraxa right now, and you really don't want to be going X=2 on Atraxa, right? If you are running Creativity and you're only running Atraxa as your target, X=2 is really awkward because it's legendary, so the second copy that you get dies, and you're just likely to have to discard to hand size off the Atraxa anyway. So Atraxa isn't a card where you really want to go for X=2. And then outside of that, there aren't really other great targets. You know, Serra's Emissary is the main other target that's been run in this sort of shell in the past, and I just don't think Serra's Emissary is well positioned right now because, you know, decks like Samwise Combo can just win through the protection anyway because Cauldron Familiar drains, and then because of the One Ring, a lot of other decks are making considerations in deck building to play around the protection from the One Ring. So for example, the Yawgmoth decks, a lot of them are electing to run the Zulaport Cutthroat over Blood Artist, which wins through protection, and then similarly a lot of the Kethis lists are choosing to run Jace Wielder of Mysteries to be able to play through the protection. So I don't think Sarah's Emissary is particularly good right now. And then the more all-in combo versions of creativity, running stuff like Gristlebrand and Chiesa or Worldspine Worm Xenagos, where you have to go for X=2, I just don't think those versions are particularly well positioned right now either, because they're generally slower. They have to be more built around combo pieces in order to set up 2 tokens for X=2, which means they have less room for interaction. And the other thing is, like I mentioned, I just don't think the cards that enable X=2 on creativity are that good. Like I said, Big Score and Hard Evidence became significantly worse because of Orcish Bowmasters, so I don't think those particular builds are very good right now. So the main 2 upsides of creativity in a vacuum, X=2 and being able to target artifact tokens, I don't think really apply very much in Historic right now. And there are some other nice benefits of Transmogrify as well. The biggest one being that you can run artifacts in your deck. So you can't really run artifacts with creativity because it interferes with your creativity hits. And in this particular build, I think Retrofitter Foundry is phenomenal. And also having sideboard access to stuff like Pithing Needle and Tormod Script is really big. I don't think the creativity decks would have any chance against decks like Yawgmoth or Kethis right now, because they can't run cards like Pithing Needle in the sideboard, which is a really big deal as well. Now, I want to quickly talk about the One Ring, because my initial build and kind of the genesis of this deck was that I could run Transmogrify alongside the One Ring in a control deck, because you can still run artifacts, obviously, as I just mentioned. And those initial builds did test pretty well. They were quite strong, but the more I played with the deck, the more I realized that the One Ring doesn't really work particularly well in this deck, because first of all, you want to be playing at instant speed a lot of the time, so tapping out for a 4-mana sorcery doesn't really play well with what the deck's trying to do. Now, obviously, Transmogrify is also a 4-mana sorcery, but the difference between getting the One Ring in play, which only provides protection, doesn't impact the board in any way, and draws you a single card, compared to getting an Atraxa in play, which draws, usually at least 3 cards into your hand, and then just immediately impacts the board, is night and day. And second of all, the deck just doesn't really offset any of the downsides of the One Ring particularly well. The only life gain that we have in the deck is Atraxa, so in order to offset the life loss from the One Ring, you have to get the One Ring and Transmogrify off, which is really difficult to achieve. And at that point, if you've got both off, you're usually going to be in a good position anyway. And additionally, it makes the deck so much worse against Shieldred and Orcish Bowmasters. So if we look at the current list, the only thing that gets impacted by Orcish Bowmasters and Shieldred is Flame of Anor and the extra effects of Volcanic Spite and Fiery Islet, all of which are optional draws. So this particular build without the One Ring isn't actually that soft to Orcish Bowmasters or Shieldred, which is a big deal. And then the replacement I've swapped it in for, Retrofitter Foundry, is so sick in this deck. So first of all, this card is just really, really good if you're playing at instant speed. If you can play Retrofitter Foundry on turn 1, it just means that you can hold open all your interaction. You can hold open your Make Disappear and your Saruman's Trickery as counter spells. You can hold open your creature removal. And then if the opponent doesn't do anything that you want to interact with, you can just make tokens and move up the chain. So it gives you a really, really nice mana sink to ensure that you always have something good to do with your mana if you don't need to interact with the opponent. Second of all, it just acts as a really sick extra win condition, right? Because of Retrofitter Foundry, we're really not reliant at all on Transmogrify, because you can just win the game off Retrofitter Foundry fairly easily. Just constantly hold open mana, gradually work your way up to 4/4s, keep making tokens to attack the opponent down. And I've won a ton of games just off the back of Retrofitter Foundry without even needing to get Transmogrify. And the other really nice thing about running these 2 cards together is, as I mentioned, sideboarding is really awkward against this deck because the opponent is incentivized to keep single target removal in order to fizzle your Transmogrifies. But if you're just winning off Retrofitter Foundry, stuff like Fatal Push is pretty bad against you, right? If the opponent Fatal Pushes your tokens off Retrofitter Foundry, you're just going to keep making more of them as the game goes on. So having these as alternate win conditions that both require really different answers is a really sick kind of dynamic to have in the deck. Then the rest of the stuff in the deck is basically just, good interaction. We are playing a control deck, so we obviously need a lot of interaction. In terms of creature removal, we got Fiery Impulse, which having 1 mana interaction is very, very important right now, because there's a lot of decks where you need to kill their turn 1 stuff. Giver of Runes is seeing some play in decks like Winota and, Greasefang and stuff like that. Being able to kill the turn 1 Dorks against Devotion is really important. Very important against Wizards to kill their early creatures as well. But more importantly than anything else, being able to kill Delighted Halfling on turn 1 is so important, because we're fairly reliant on counter spells in a lot of matchups, like Make Disappear and Saruman's Tricky. So being able to kill the Halfling on turn 1 so that our counter spells are alive is very important as well. And then it's very easy for us to get Spell Mastery online, and then this deals 3 damage, which is really important against cards like Jarsel as well. So Fiery Impulse, really, really sick at the 1 mana slot. I guess one other thing I forgot to mention about Retrofitter Foundry as well is it really nicely fills the 1-drop slot as well, because in Izzet Colors there aren't really other great options at the 1-drop slot. The next best alternative is something like Consider. But that became, again, another card that got hit with, became worse with the addition of Orcish Bowmasters. So Foundry filling the 1-drop slot as well is a really nice upside of that as well. And then the other, dedicated removal spell that we've got here is Volcanic Spite, which instant speed deal 3 to a creature or planeswalker, hits most of the creatures that are commonly played. And then the really nice upside of Volcanic Spite is it also enables us to put Atraxa back in the deck if we happen to draw it. So if you look at the mana base, we don't actually have any way to hardcast Atraxa at all. So it is pretty important that we have some cards that can put it back in the deck if we do draw it, or our Transmogrifiers become a lot worse then. And then, similarly, we've also got Seek New Knowledge, which is interesting. It's kind of a cantrip, but it can't find lands, which is pretty important. But the other nice thing about Seek New Knowledge is, again, similar to Volcanic Spite, we get to seek 2 non-land cards, and then we can also use it to put Atraxa on the bottom of our deck as well. So we have 6 ways main deck to put Atraxa back in the deck, which has felt really nice overall. Then we've also got Flame of Anor, which is a really nice card in this deck because, first of all, it's just really flexible. The ability to draw 2 cards as a floor is really nice. Now, obviously, drawing 2 with Orcish Bowmasters being everywhere is kind of risky, but the other 2 modes are relevant enough in most matchups that you don't have to go for the draw 2. And there are obviously a lot of spots where the draw 2 is just decent anyway. Even if the opponent does flash in Bowmasters in response, we have so much interaction that it's not really that much of a big deal. But being able to draw 2 is really nice. Being able to destroy an artifact isn't that relevant main deck, but post-sideboard, if people are bringing Pithing Needle against you to name Retrofit a Foundry, it's pretty nice to have access to that as well. And then the ability to deal 5 to target creature is super relevant right now because traditionally Izzet decks have really struggled to deal with Shieldred. So, ideally we want to be dealing with Shieldred with counter spells, but the decks that typically run Shieldred, like the Rakdos and GB Midrange decks, are full of discard spells, so it's not unlikely that we'll be in a position where the opponent does resolve a Shieldred. And Flame of Anor, just being able to deal with it, for 3 mana at instant speed is so sick. And then on top of that, it also works really well with Mutavault, because Mutavault is a land that counts as all creature types when it's animated. So for 4 mana, we can animate the Mutavault and then pick 2 modes on Flame of Anor, which is so powerful. Speaking of which, Mutavault also works really well with the Retrofitter Foundry because, again, Mutavault counts as all creature types, so we can animate the Mutavault and then just sack it to the Retrofitter Foundry to make a 4/4 as well, which is really sick as well. So Mutavault, really sick in this deck. And then another thing that is really great with is Transmogrify, because, as I mentioned, we want to be transmogrifying into Atraxa, and Mutavault enables us to do that for 5 mana. Even if we don't have any creature tokens into play, we can just tap Mutavault for mana, animate it, and then target it with Transmogrify. So Mutavault is an absolute all-star in this deck. Works really nicely with Retrofitter Foundry, Flame of Anor, and Transmogrify, and also Make Disappear as well in a pinch. Now, typically, we're not that happy to use Mutavault for Make Disappear, but if you really need to counter something, that's something that you can do as well. But speaking of which, Make Disappear, 2 mana counter spell that is really good on turn 2 to just counter everything. And then because we are creating a bunch of creature tokens off stuff like Retrofitter Foundry, Saruman's Trickery, and Mutavault and Mirex, and also Sokken's as well, we can casualty this fairly easily as well. Getting Retrofitter Foundry down on turn 1 and then making creature tokens for Make Disappear later is a really nice synergy as well. So Make Disappear, really nice on turn 2, and then works pretty well in the mid to late game as well because of all our creature tokens. And then, as I mentioned, Saruman's Trickery, really sick addition to this deck because it's just a hard counter spell on turn 3. Really nice to have an addition to Make Disappear, so if the game does go really long and the opponent has 4 mana available to pay for Make Disappear, we have Saruman's Trickery as just a hard counter spell for everything. And then the ability to amass Orcs 1 is so good with Transmogrify. As I mentioned, a lot of decks are tapping out against you on turn 3, and the ability to just go counter something, make an Orc into Transmogrify the following turn is so strong. So those are all the non-lands. Moving on to the mana base now. 28 lands might seem like a lot, and in my initial build of the deck, I was running 27 for a really long time. And in the gameplay that I got coming up, the first 2 matches that you're going to see is with a slightly older version of the deck where I was running a main deck Pithing Needle instead of the 28th land. But the more I played with the deck, the more I realized that you really want a high land count with this deck, because you really want your 4th land on curve without needing to filter for it as consistently as possible. Because, as I mentioned, going turn 3 Trickery into turn 4 Transmogrify is a very common curve out, and if you miss your 4th land, that's an absolute disaster. And then on top of that, you often want to draw your 5th land on curve as well because of Mutavault into Transmogrify on turn 5, right? You want to be able to interact in the first few turns, potentially interact on turn 4 to, hopefully tap the opponent out, and then on turn 5, hit your 5th land, animate Mutavault, and then Transmogrify into Atraxa as well. So you really want to be drawing your lands consistently up to turn 5. So I think 28 lands is really important. And this particular list gets to run a ton of utility lands as well. So as I mentioned, Mutavault is an absolute all-star in this deck. Outside of just being a good creature land in general, we can animate it to target with Transmogrify. We can animate it to, trigger 2 modes on Flame of Anor. We can also animate it to make it into a 4/4 with Retrofitter Foundry, and you can, combine these together. I've had turns where the opponent attacks with a number of creatures, I animate Mutavault to block, then use Flame of Anor to kill one of their creatures and draw 2, and then main phase 2 sacrifice it to make a 4/4 as well. So Mutavault, such a sick card in this deck, and you want to draw it as consistently as possible. Then we've also got 4 Fiery Islet, which is a card I wasn't running until fairly recently. So as I mentioned, the first 2 games in the gameplay that got coming up is with a slightly earlier version of this deck where I was running Shivan Reef over Fiery Islet, and I was kind of reluctant to run Fiery Islet initially because I thought that the life loss would be an issue. The upside of Shivan Reef is you don't always have to take damage of it, whereas Fiery Islet does, but the extra utility of being able to just sacrifice this to draw a card has come up way more often, and with Atraxa as our top end card that can just gain us a bunch of life, the life loss from this really isn't that bad in the grand scheme of things. So I'm a big fan of changing Shivan Reef to 4 Fiery Islet. It's also another way that we can mitigate going up to 28 lands, because if we do flood out, we can just sacrifice it to draw a card. Obviously, you do need to play around, be wary of Bowmasters when you do that, but I definitely think this is worth it, and, is a nice land that produces colours of both, produces both colours and also enables you to just mitigate floods slightly better later in the game. Single copy of Mirrex is really nice here as another token generator. Very, very good against the control decks if we don't have Retrofitter Foundry. I don't like running more than one of this though, because even though it does produce a mana of any colour the turn it comes down, we're playing at instant speed the majority of the time, so that doesn't really help to cast stuff like Saruman's Trickery, for example. And with 4 Retrofitter Foundry that does a very similar thing, I don't think you really need more than the first copy of this, but drawing the first copy always feels good. And then we've got single copy of Otawara and single copy of Sokenzan as extra utility lands here. Otawara is just nice as extra interaction. And then Sokenzan is obviously very nice in this deck as well, because we want to be creating creature tokens to target with Transmogrify. And then the rest of the mana base is just dual lands. Riverglide Pathway is slightly annoying in this deck because, we do need red on turn 1 and double blue on turn 3, and we are running 4 colourless lands as well, but I don't think you can really afford to run Shivan Reef in addition to Fiery Islet. Then I do think the life loss does add up quite a lot, but in terms of the options we have, this has felt pretty good overall. And like I mentioned, I do think a high land count is important because we do need to keep drawing lands until our 5th land ideally. And then moving on to the sideboard, as I mentioned, having access to artifacts in the sideboard is really, really nice. That's a very nice upside of running Transmogrify over creativity. I've got 2 Tormod's Crypt as my graveyard hate of choice, which is mainly here for matchups like Reanimator and Kethis combo. The reason I've gone for Tormod's Crypt over alternatives like Soulguide Lantern and Unlicensed Hearse is, first of all, because it enables us to cast it without interfering with our interaction for that turn. So say we draw it on turn 3 and we want to hold open Saruman's Trickery. It being 0 mana means we can immediately put it into play and still have all of our mana available for our turn 3 interaction. But the main reason I'm running the Tormod's Crypt here is because we can immediately fetch it off Atraxa. So if it's going into turn 4 and we're up against a deck like Kethis, for example, we can Transmogrify into Atraxa, and then if we hit a Tormod's Crypt off Atraxa, we can just play it immediately, even if we have no other mana available, which is really, really important. So that's the big advantage of it over Lantern or Hearse, because if we do just tap out for Transmogrify on turn 4, and we hit a Lantern or a Hearse, we can't play it that turn, whereas we can with Crypt. Then we've got 4 copies of Pithing Needle, which is such an important card in the current metagame right now. And as I mentioned, I was actually previously running a single copy in the main deck, which shows how good this card is in the format right now. And the reason that I'm running 4 is because you really want to draw the first 2 copies against a lot of decks, the One Ring decks, Yawgmoth, Kethis combo, even the Gates deck that I've seen a fair amount of recently. And the main reason for this is that a lot of the decks where Pithing Needle is good against them are going to be boarding into artifact removal, particularly if they see Retrofitter Foundry. I think the opponent's likely to bring in artifact removal against you anyway. And so against Yawgmoth, you really want to find that second copy so you can get 2 in play, so that if the opponent finds something like a Haywire Might, you still have that second backup copy. Additionally, against Yawgmoth, they often run the 1 on Ring as well, so you sometimes want to have 1 on Yawgmoth, 1 on the 1 Ring to shut both of them off. Similarly, against Kethis, they're going to have a lot of artifact removal against you post sideboard, so getting that second copy in play naming Kethis is really big as well, because then they have to find 2 pieces of artifact removal to unlock their combo, and then against the Gates deck, naming Maze's End shuts off their main way to win, and then a lot of those decks are running the 1 Ring as well. So I really like bringing all 4 copies because you actively want to draw the first 2, and then if you do end up drawing more than 2, which is kind of unlikely, but even if you do, you can put them back in the deck with Volcanic Spite and Seek New Knowledge as well. So 4 Needle has felt really, really big right now, and if you're not running this, I think you're really going to struggle against Yawgmoth, Kethis, and the 1 Ring decks in general. Then we've got a single copy of Brotherhood's End and 2 Stranglers extra interaction. I like the Strangles here because they're obviously good against stuff like Wizards, but against the Delighted Halfling decks, I really want to have a high density of turn 1 interaction to shut off their ability to play through our counter spells. So Against decks that are running Halfling, I bring in Strangle as well to go alongside the Fiery Impulse. And then a single copy of Brotherhood's End is really nice. You know, there aren't that many go wide decks or artifact decks in the format right now, but against the decks that are going wide, having access to this that we can find off Atraxa is really nice. So I've liked it as a one-off, but because it's fairly easy for us to dig for it off Atraxa. And then we've got 3 Negate and 3 Mystical Dispute as extra counter spells, mainly for matchups like Control or just, you know, non-creature decks in general, like Mirror Match or against Belcher, for example. Just enables us to cut our creature removal, bring in extra counter spells, and we can also usually bring in Pithing Needle in those matchups as well. But yeah, we've obviously got a lot of creature removal in the main deck, so having counter spells in the sideboard to replace them with is really nice. And then obviously against decks like Gates as well, you do want extra counter spells there to be able to stop stuff like Circuitous Route and Primeval Titan. So that's the deck overall. I've been having a ton of fun with it. This deck has gone through a ton of iterations and it has felt really, really strong in the current meta game overall. And next I've got some gameplay. As I mentioned, the first 2 matches are going to be with a slightly older version of the deck. So that explains why there's a single Pithing Needle and a slightly older mana base. But this particular build I've got here with the Fiery Islets is definitely the better build of the deck. But anyway, as I mentioned, got 5 games coming up so you guys can see the deck in action. Give me a shout in the comments below if you've got any questions about the deck at all. And I hope you enjoy the gameplay. Big up. Okay, so we're going second here. And yep, this one looks good to me. Right, we've got Foundry on turn 1, plus a bunch of instant speed interactions. So as long as we can keep hitting land drops, this hand's really good. We can slam the Foundry on turn 1 and then hold up our removal and our counter spells. And if the opponent doesn't do anything that we want to interact with, we can just pump our mana into Foundry, start building up some tokens for Transmogrify, or to just build up a big board to start attacking the opponent. So very happy with this as long as we can keep drawing some lands. So we'll see what the opponent's on here. Okay, Godless Shrine taps could be a number of things. Definitely just going to play the Foundry on turn 1 here, but yeah, they could be on Winota, could be on Samwise combo. We'll have to see. Okay, Temple Garden into Innkeeper, so almost definitely going to be against Sam combo here, which I think should be a pretty good matchup. You know, we have a lot of interaction. I think generally Samwise combo is better for us than pure Yawgmoth because we have so much interaction that we can keep them off their combo, and whereas Yawgmoth, if we don't have a Pithing Needle, they just get to draw a bunch straight away. So going to use a Volcanic Spite on the Samwise to deny them some food here, and I think I'm going to put back the Flame of Anor because Volcanic Spite is going to be, you know, much more efficient at killing their creatures because they're all pretty small. And then I think we do want to keep Needle here because we can use Needle to name Cauldron Familiar or Woe Strider. I think in the dark I prefer naming Cauldron Familiar because some versions of Samwise are running a single copy of Yawgmoth that they can tutor with Chord of Calling. So if you name Cauldron Familiar, you lock off the combo even if they have multiple sack outlets. Definitely not going to play the Pithing Needle here though because I want to hold open mana for Saruman's Trickery. So if they don't do anything here, I think I'm just going to use Volcanic Spite to put Atraxa back in the deck, hopefully find the 4th land. And, well, we'll see. Okay, so they don't do anything. Going to target the Gilded Goose here just to deny them some mana. And obviously deny them any extra food tokens. Put back the Atraxa. Okay, we draw Seeking Knowledge, not the 4th land. Okay, so we find the 4th land off the top though, perfect. So now I can go for Pithing Needle, and I think I'm just going to name Cauldron Familiar. I'm not, you know, not 100% sure what build the opponent's on here because they could be on Collected Company, they could be on the One Ring, they could be on Chord of Calling with Yawgmoth. So I think naming Cauldron Familiar should be the safest name here. And, you know, if they do have the One Ring, we have the Saruman's Trickery. They don't have Delighted Halfling, so they can't really play around that. Okay, wow, Llanowar Elves is a brave choice in a Bowmaster's meta, but I respect it, and they're not going to get punished in this matchup because we're not running Bowmasters. So they attack in, definitely not going to use the Foundry yet because we want to, you know, wait in case they're sandbagging something for main phase 2. I think we can start using the Foundry here, just put a blocker into play. I'm not going to attack here because we can just use it on defense, right? We're playing the long game here. We should have the inevitability, so we don't just want to get aggressive for no reason. Woe Strider is interesting. I think I'm going to counter that because that is one of their combo pieces. And I feel like if they had something else powerful here, they probably would have played it last turn. So I think I'm going to snap off a Saruman's Trickery here. I don't think they have quite enough cards in the graveyard to immediately escape it yet either. So don't have to worry too much about that. And then we still have a mana spare here to, you know, move up the chain with the Retrofit Foundry, get closer to the 4/4, which is nice. Okay, perfect. We found another land, so I have actually been thinking about going up to 28 lands, and I'm kind of tempted to make that swap because, you know, this kind of scenario highlights that if we'd missed our 5th land drop, we immediately start getting choked on mana here. We really want to hit our 5th land on curve in the vast majority of games. So I'm kind of tempted to cut the main deck needle, even though it is good in this matchup, because I have faced a number of situations where it's not actually that great, and I would rather it be an extra land. So I'm tempted to make that swap. We'll have to see how the next few games play out or not. By the way, I'm going to use Seek New Knowledge here. Okay, sick. We find a Transmogrify. That's great. And then I don't think I want to use Flame of Anor unit. Obviously, if I was going to use Flame of Anor, I would have Flame of Anor first so that we have more options with the Seek New Knowledge. But I feel like the opponent must have Collected Company here for them to do nothing with their turn. Or they literally have nothing. Or potentially a Chord of Calling as well. And so I don't want to tap out and let them cast a Company or a Chord of Calling here. Ah, okay. They just had Takenuma instead. Oh, interesting. They're running Rosie as well. So, okay, they're running a build with 2 combos in. So I assume they're running Collected Company. Oh, we just saw Company. Okay, they do have Scurry Oak into Rosie here, which is obviously scary. You know, means that tapping out against them ever is going to be risky because of cards like Collected Company, which can hit both combos. But we have so much interaction here that I think as long as we play carefully, we should be good. I think I'm going to Saruman's Trickery the Scurry Oak here. And then see what else they do. If they tap out for the Rosie, we can make Disappear with Casualty if we wanted to. And I think the main thing is just keeping their combo pieces off the board here. Obviously, we don't care about the Innkeeper because that's not an integral part of either of their combo. But yeah, we'll see what they do. They're looking at their graveyard, so they might be going for Escaped Woe Strider, which will be better for us here because we can just make Disappear that without needing to Casualty, which is pretty nice. And that also taps them out, so we can just go for Transmogrify. So definitely going to snap off the Make Disappear here. And yeah, since they are running Rosie Scurry Oak combo, then this does also make our Pithing Needle worse. This is kind of another example of a matchup where the Pithing Needle main deck might not actually be that good. I think sideboard you really want all 4 copies, but yeah, I have been thinking about swapping the main deck Pithing Needle for a 28th land. By the way, we get to resolve Atraxa here, which is sick. Okay, we hit Transmogrify, a land. Okay, opponent just scoops it up. Yeah, we would have got another counter spell just to, you know, keep them off stuff like Collected Company and Chord of Calling. So interesting they're running both combos here. So again, I'm not sure Pithing Needle is that great because we can just lose to the Scurry Oak combo. So I'm going to bring in Strangle and Brotherhood's Ends. I think Seek New Knowledge isn't as good here. And then I think I can afford to trim a Trickery maybe. Maybe that's greedy. We'll have to see. I mean, Trickery is very good against Chord of Calling and Collected Company, but so maybe if it goes to a game 3, I might be better off trimming a Flame of Anor instead. I could see that. Yeah, but we didn't see Chord of Calling game 1, and if they're running both combos, I think there's a chance that the only card that we would really want to be countering is Collected Company. So I don't know. I don't mind how I've sideboarded. So these sorts of hands are pretty awkward because putting this pathway on red and having Mutavault means that we probably can't cast Saruman's Trickery on turn 3, but I think that's fine. Okay, we drew a Dual Land, which is very important. So it gets to run out Retrofit Foundry here on turn 1. And now we have access to red and can still potentially have double blue on turn 3 for Saruman's Trickery as well, which is pretty nice. So we'll see what the opponent does here. Wow, nothing. Okay, so that must be an Orcish Bowmasters, right? Drawing in Atraxa here is a bit annoying, but thankfully we still have the second one in the deck for the Transmogrify. I think I'm just going to run out a second Retrofit Foundry here, right? That does signal to the opponent we don't have Make Disappear, but I'd rather get the second one in play here because I'm fairly confident we're going to have, you know, a target for Fiery Impulse next turn. If I didn't think the opponent would cast any creatures, then there's maybe an argument to holding open 2 mana to bluff the Make Disappear and potentially use the Foundry, but I'm pretty confident I'm going to be using Fiery Impulse here against something, so I think it makes sense to play the second Foundry now. But yeah, we'll see what they've got on turn 3 here. You know, this deck doesn't get particularly hurt by Bowmasters outside of Flame of Anor and Volcanic Spite, but if they don't cast anything better, I think I will target the Bowmasters with a Fiery Impulse. Okay, opponent does play Gilded Goose though, which I think is probably the better target for the Fiery Impulse, but I think I'm just going to hold it though, honestly, because I'm mainly worried about their combo pieces more than anything else. So interesting spot here whether we want to play this on blue or red. I kind of want to play it on blue because of Saruman's Trickery, but we do have a lot of red spells in hand. Playing it on red does enable us to go Strangle into Fiery Impulse, for example. So I think I'm going to play it on red for now. And then, you know, we need our 4th land to find or to cast Transmogrify anyway. And chances of it being a blue land are pretty high anyway. So I don't mind playing this on red while we have a handful of red cards. Again, we could have used Strangle on the Gilded Goose, but I would much rather have access to removal for their combo pieces more than anything else. Especially because they're running 2 different combos in the deck. So we'll see what they do here. If they pass, that's probably just going to be a Collected Company, I imagine. In which case, I don't mind activating the Foundry here because we don't have a counterspell, and I'd much rather them do it now so that we can then strangle something during our turn, rather than them do it during our end step and then strangle not being live. Okay, so now they've cast a Scurry Oak. Now I'm happy to use the Fiery Impulse because that does cut them off a combo piece, which is pretty nice. And now we can just pump our mana into the Retrofit Foundry. Okay, we do find the 4th land, but it's a tap land, which is a bit awkward, but, you know, Spy Bluff Canal being untapped in the first few turns is so valuable that occasionally having that happen is fine. And they did still have a mana open, right? Actually, I was going to say there's a chance they have Fatal Push, but considering their deck being so creature heavy, I think there's a decent chance that they've only got Fatal Push in the sideboard and they probably aren't going to bring it in this matchup. Okay, so there is Samwise. I mean, wow, and Woe Strider, so... I mean, thankfully they don't have the Cauldron Familiar as well, and they wouldn't have had the mana to cast everything, even if they did have all 3. But we have Strangle here as an answer, so not too concerned about this turn. If they attack him with everything, I mean, we could block here potentially. We definitely want to keep 1 token for Transmogrify next turn because I think I want to go Transmogrify. Because we're almost guaranteed to find a land off the Transmogrify, and then we can go land, use Strangle on either Samwise or the Woe Strider to cut them off that combo. And they've only got 1 card left, so I think I'm going to block here, make a Thopter, and then we can just make another token with our last 2 mana. So that just denies them a damage. We could have traded with the Baymasters, but I don't think there's really much advantage to doing that because the only thing it's really shutting off is Flame of Naught, which we don't even have right now. Okay, interesting. So we find a Shivan Reef, so we find the 5th land naturally anyway. So I think I'm just going to fire off Transmogrify now while the opponent's tapped out. Again, their deck, I very much doubt they can afford to bring in Fatal Push against us because they're a very creature-heavy deck. We get Traxxer in. Now we have access to Strangle. We'll see what we hit. Oh, wow. Brotherhood's End is sick here. So hopefully Strangle can get the job done and cut them off the combo for long enough. And then next time we can just Brotherhood's End their whole board. So now... not sure whether we want to go for Samwise or Strider here, to be honest. Okay, they've only got 1 card in the graveyard, so I don't think it makes a big difference, but I'm going to go after the Samwise here. That does allow them more scries with the Strider, so maybe I'm supposed to go after Strider, actually, but the thing is with Strider is they could just sack a bunch of creatures to fill their graveyard to immediately escape it, so I think on balance it's better to go after the Samwise here, but it's close. The other annoying thing about Woe Strider here is they can still potentially attack and just sacrifice whatever Atraxa blocks. But I'm not concerned. We basically get a free attack with the 1/1 here because we can just sack it to turn it into a 4/4 to block anyway. So it looks like opponent's digging here, and you know they're stuck on 3 lands, so even if they find Collected Company, they would need to also find a land. So I'm pretty confident about this spot now. If we can get through to the next turn in Brotherhood's End, they basically have to reset. Okay, they did scry 1 to the top, so that's kind of scary, but presumably they don't have the 4th land or they would have played it last turn, right? So, and they've only got 1 combo piece in play in a 3-turn combo, so, you know, they can't go Cauldron Familiar, Samwise the same turn, they can't go Rosie, Scurry Oak the same turn. Oh, they bottom. Maybe that top was a misclick then. Okay, they're scrying again. I don't know what they're digging for here, though, because, you know, the Woe Strider combo is a 3-piece combo that they only have 1 piece of. Collected Company requires another land, so... Okay, another Woe Strider. I mean, that's not going to get the job done, right? We just Brotherhood's End here. And since we also make this 1/1 into a 4/4, that also survives Brotherhood's End as well, so... I think we should just be good here, right? Unless there's something I've forgotten about. You know, they can't cast Chord of Calling here because they don't have enough green creatures, so... Yeah, okay, opponent just keeps it up. So that felt pretty good. Okay, so we're on the play here. And yeah, happy to keep this one, right. Obviously having a Traxxer in the opening hand is a little bit awkward, but we do have Spite to put it back, so... So we're against the Gigantha deck here, which could be a number of things. Could obviously be Kethis, could be Wizards, could be Samwise combo potentially as well. So we'll have to see what we're up against. But either way, we've got, early counterspells and early interactions. So I think we should be good to interact. And typically Gigantha decks are usually creature based unless they're on domain. So I think this should be pretty good against them, hopefully. Then we just got to hopefully dig towards stuff like Transmogrify. Okay, so we're up against Wizards here. So I'm definitely going to fire off the Volcanic Spite here just to deny them any extra value they could get off cards like Wizard's Lightning or Mentor's Guidance, for example. And it also enables us to just put the Traxor back immediately, which is pretty nice. Okay, so they do have a follow-up Soulscar Mage and Birth Escape. Okay, so they're running the Ring Tempts You version. Oh, perfect. Okay, we found Transmogrify, so as long as we can find a good card to counter here, we can potentially go for Transmogrify next turn. If they tap out for anything here, we should be good. Okay, so Birthday Escape, I think we let that one resolve. So hopefully they don't just go land pass here. Hopefully they tap out for something like an Arcanist. If they do leave a mana open, that's going to be a bit awkward, because then they can obviously, represent Play with Fire or Wizard's Lightning. But the fact they're on the Ring Tempts You version is probably good if they're running the Ranger's Firebrand, because that's obviously sorcery speed. Okay, so they do pass back. We didn't get an opportunity to counter. I mean, we could have obviously countered the Birthday Escape there, but I think that would have been a mistake. And I still think we're in a pretty good spot here, right? We have the Mutavault, so if they do tap out here, we can either Trickery into Transmogrify or just use Mutavault. Okay, so they are running Ranger's Firebrand, which is, good news for us, I think, because that then means that they have fewer ways to fizzle our Transmogrify. So they do get to loot again off the Soulscar Mage, but not really too much we can do about it. If they just pass here without doing anything, I think I'm just going to use the Otawara just to bounce the Soulscar Mage, reset their Ring Bearer. So they obviously have interaction here, or they would be doing something else. So I've got a read that they probably must have Wizard's Lightning or something here. So we'll play it patiently, right? We're not in a massive rush. Had we not had that Otawara, things might have been a bit more difficult. But since we do, we don't have to worry too much. I think we'll probably counter the Soulscar Mage with the Trickery, get that 1/1 token in play, and then see what else they do. So we'll Trickery the Soulscar Mage, cut them off a creature, because the most important thing in this matchup is just getting rid of their creatures wherever possible. They really struggle to win without it. And then we can make disappear the Arcanist here, and then pay very close attention to if they have priority. So they do have something. Okay, they just tap out here. Hopefully they don't play another land. Okay, perfect. So now we can just animate the Mutavault, and just Transmogrify into a Traxor, which, unless they have Otawara of their own, or they're like main decking like Fading Hove or something, should be good enough to win, right? We're at 14 life and we get an Atraxa here, so definitely want the Retrofitter Foundry. Okay, yeah, opponent just scoops it up. So yeah, this should be a pretty good matchup, I think. We have a lot of early interaction. We definitely want the Strangles here for sure. Needle's obviously pretty bad. And then I think we want Brotherhood's End as well, probably. You can cut the Seek New Knowledges, I think, and probably go down a Trickery as well. I think, as we saw last game, if the opponent can get a creature in play before our counterspells are live, particularly going second, I think we can be in trouble there. So, but yeah, I think this matchup should be pretty good. We have a lot of early interaction, which is the most important way to win here. And then, it's going to put the opponent in an awkward position now where they're, typically against control, they want to board out stuff like Play with Fire. I guess they're running Ranger's Firebrand, so that's an easy cut, but they're going to have to play reactively here, or they risk us just winning with Transmogrify. And Retrofitter Foundry should also be pretty sick here if we can get that one online early. It's just a way to keep producing chump blockers against them. Okay, pretty happy to keep this one. We don't have early interaction, which is a little bit awkward if they have a turn 1 creature, but I don't think we can afford to ship this one back. So I think we're going to play this Steam Vents tapped here. We want to, mitigate any life loss we possibly can. So we're going to take the opportunity to play this tap now. Oh, yikes. Okay, so they have 2 creatures underneath. This is the risk of not keeping a hand without turn 1 or 2 interaction, because now they represent quite a lot of damage and we don't really have good ways to stop it, right? We don't have any Strangles, or we do have Flame of Anor next turn, which isn't nothing. That's kind of the main reason why I kept this hand, because we do have some interaction, but maybe I'm supposed to mulligan to like a Strangle or a Volcanic Spike going second. Or a Fiery Impulse, maybe. Okay, Ranger's Firebrand. Could counter that. I feel like I want to use my mana efficiently every single turn, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to... Well, obviously next time we're going to use Flame of Nor or Trickery, so... Could get punished if they have a 1-mana creature here, but... I think that's probably the right line. Just reduces some of the damage. So do Birthday Escape again. We do take 5, which is quite a lot here. But yeah, I just don't think it's worth the risk of not playing the Make Disappear there, and then... okay, Wizard's Lightning as well. That's a lot of damage in one turn. But yeah, had we... had they not played anything else that turn and we hadn't used the Make Disappear there, that would have been just wasted mana, which, when we have a lot of 3 and 4 mana cards in our hand is not great, really. I mean, we do have... The debate there is whether I want to Flame of Anor or hold open mana here, because if we Flame of Anor, we deny them the Arcanist trigger. Holding open Trickery here is pretty nice, though, because if they do tap out for something or they play another creature, we can counter it and then set up for Transmogrify the following turn. But now we are letting them get a flashback off the Arcanist. The other thing is, though, if we tap out for Flame of Anor during our turn, if they keep in Reckless Charge against us, that does mean that we can potentially be dead to something like a, Symmetry Sage into Reckless Charge, which would be pretty rough. So I'm not 100% sure. I feel like... I don't know. We can at least use Flame of Nor at our end step, or if they don't play anything, I feel like they probably are going to play something main phase 2, and having Trickery here to potentially go Transmogrify gives us a better line to win. But they don't do anything. So that was now I obviously wish that I'd used Flame of Nor beforehand, but they could still have creature into Reckless Charge, and they could just be sandbagging it because we have open mana, so... Still not 100% sure. I'm definitely going to watch this one back to see whether I should have gone for the Flame of Nor earlier there or not. I think it's close, though. Because if they had played a creature main phase 2, I think we just snap off Trickery. And then, they could obviously have Wizard's Lightning to try and fizzle the Transmogrify, but... So here I think I'm just going to channel the Sokenzan here. We can block one with the Soul Scar Mage and potentially represent Transmogrify next turn if they do tap out. Or we can... get a read they don't have anything. By the way, one very important trick with this deck is you can pass to see if the opponent is holding priority. This is the deck where arena leaking information is probably the most valuable out of any deck. Because if we pass here and we see they don't have anything, then that shows that the way is clear to go for Transmogrify. So I'll pass here and see if they do. Okay, so they have priority for something. Although, to be honest, that could be the Fiery Islet, right? So this situation is a bad example, but in general, you can usually tell if the opponent has an instant speed piece of interaction to fizzle your Transmogrify. Okay, so the opponent did have a piece of interaction, which is pretty rough, but I still feel like it was correct to just go for it there, because waiting doesn't really provide us any benefit whatsoever, right? If we don't have any way to remove their creatures on board, and we're still alive here, right? Assuming they don't have another way to boost the power of their board. Balmor, so if they have another spell here, we're probably dead. Oh, wow, and Reckless Charge. So they must have drawn one of those two off the top. I mean, we'd have still been dead to the Reckless Charge regardless, but I still think it was probably correct to go for it there, because if they don't have anything, we probably win. And if they do have something, then the benefit of waiting is basically non-existent. We only have a Saruman's Trickery. We don't have any way to influence the board. So I still think it was correct to go for it there. I think the main decision point in that game, the turning point was... that turn where I held open Saruman's Trickery and Flame of Anor. But if they were holding on to Balmor plus Reckless Charge, we would have lost if we had gone for the Flame of Anor there, probably. So, I don't know. It's close. I'm definitely going to watch those back. But I did feel like we got a little bit unfortunate there. If they don't have the Abrade, we probably win. If they hadn't drawn either Balmor or Reckless Charge, we have the second Transmogrify to get another Attraction the following turn, but being on the play in game 3 should be a big advantage here. Okay, so this is kind of a sketchy one, but I think I can keep this, right? We've got enough lands, and we've got Brotherhood's End and Trickery, so... Brotherhood's End on turn 3 on the play should be pretty good. If they don't have a creature-heavy hand, then that's good for us. If they do, then we have the answer anyway, so... Even though we are a little land heavy here, I think it's fine. But it's close. This isn't a great hand. But I think it's still worth keeping. Wow, another land off the top isn't great here. I'm going to set stops just to bluff interaction here. I don't want to give away to the opponent that we just don't have anything. Okay, they do have another creature, so I'd be happy for them to just commit more to the board here. If they have like a third, one drop, that would be great. Okay, so they have Wizard's Lightning. So they do get in for a decent amount of damage this turn, but we do have the Brotherhood's End to just kill both creatures, which is pretty big. There's a decent chance these are the only 2 creatures they have, because the Wizard's deck doesn't run that many creatures. Okay, Strangle off the top's really nice. Now that gives us a way to kill another creature if they do play something else while we're tapped out. Okay, they do have the Arcanist, so that Strangle top deck was very important. So we're going to run out the Mutavault here, and then we'll just Strangle the Arcanist, and then we still have mana up for Saruman's Trickery here, so even though we don't have much top end, I still feel pretty good about this spot, right? We still have the Mutavault here. If we can Trickery something big like this Arcanist, then Transmogrify off the top is a really good draw. Retrofit a Foundry would be a really good draw here as well. Okay, they have the Spell Pierce, but they don't have anything great in the graveyard to target, right? Okay, Retrofit a Foundry is a sick draw here. So now we have a really good way to just keep producing blockers, and they don't have any 1-mana instants or sorceries in the graveyard to get back with Arcanist. If they attack here, I think I'm pretty happy animating Mutavault and turning it into a 4/4 to just block the Arcanist, because they would need like Reckless Rage to punish that, which I very much doubt they've brought in against us. So I think I'm happy to just animate the Mutavault here, turn it into a 4/4. We could have animated it as, maybe I'm supposed to just animate it as a, as a 2/2 blocker to try and bait out a removal spell. But this at least represents Saruman's Trickery as like a bluff, right? I guess they could also have Wizard's Lightning to kill the 4/4, but again, I'm pretty happy with that trade, right? We trade a Mutavault for an Arcanist and a Wizard's Lightning, which when I'm at 13 seems like a really good exchange to me. Yeah, okay, they do have the Wizard's Lightning, but again, I'm pretty happy with that trade. And then they just got 1 card left in hand. Oh, okay, Transmogrify is a great draw, especially now that we got the Foundry going as well. Okay, Iteration's a good one for them though. But yeah, I feel pretty good about this spot. We still have Otawara as a piece of interaction as well, which is really nice. Okay, I really hope they tap out and don't have another land here. Okay, they do have another land, so if their last card's a Wizard's Lightning, it's going to be pretty rough, but we should be able to, hopefully Arena gives away whether they do have something. So if you're playing against this deck, you really should be, setting stops or going into full control mode. Okay, Fiery Impulse is nice as a way to kill Symmetry Sage. Okay, Arena's just giving away that they don't have anything here. I can tell, by the way, if you're not familiar, you can tell because Arena just passes priority immediately, right? You can tell there's like no delay for the opponent to click Resolve, if that makes sense. By the way, we get to Resolve Atraxa here, and now, at 13 life, we should just be good here. So we get to pick up Brotherhood's End, Fiery Impulse, and probably just going to pick up a Pathway here. Then we can hold open Fiery Impulse if they do draw a creature. But yeah, we should just be good. I mean, obviously they could have boarded in Fading Hope or something against us, but yeah, Atraxa should just be good enough, I think. Plus, we still have the Retrofit Foundry here. If they do find a way to kill Atraxa. Okay, opponent just keeps that up. So yeah, we got there. Nice. Okay, so we're on the play here. And yeah, I think this hand's a keep. There are two awkward things. We've got the Atraxa here, which I think is fine. Having the first Atraxa is normally alright because we have the second one still in the deck for the first Transmogrify, and we obviously have the Forespite 2 Seek New Knowledge to put it back as well. The other awkward thing is the 2 Fiery Islets here, which aren't normally an issue, but, with a Retrofit Foundry, we are probably going to want to activate it every single turn, or at least use counter spells, so we might end up dealing ourselves a lot of damage, but I still have felt like the Fiery Islets are definitely worth it, and if we can draw another untapped land that isn't Fiery Islet here, we should be really good as well. But yeah, outside of that, we got Foundry, we got 2 counter spells. So I feel like we're pretty good, especially if we're against Dimir Control here. If we're against Ninjas, it's going to be a little bit more tricky, but having a Retrofit Foundry in these Control Mirror matches is a huge deal. Okay, so opponent takes the Trickery, and we do draw another land that isn't Fiery Islet. So that's pretty nice just in terms of not taking a bunch of damage when we're activating the Retrofitter Foundry. Okay, so nothing on turn 2, almost certainly against control rather than ninjas here, which is really good. So we are flooding out a little bit, but thankfully we still have the counter spells. We have the Fiery Islets as well, if we do need to cash them in for extra card draw. But more importantly than anything else, we have the Retrofitter Foundry online here, which, unless the opponent has Archmage's Charm, should just be really good here. Okay, opponent plays a Swamp, so we don't have to worry about Archmage's Charm here. We can tap out. Even if the opponent does Archmage's Charm in the Foundry, we've still got Flame of Anor to deal with it, so... But yeah, since the opponent doesn't have Archmage's Charm mana, we should just be good to keep activating the Foundry here. Okay, sick. Now we've got Transmogrify, so we have a good way to punish the opponent if they ever tap out here, which is pretty big. But either way, we can just keep attacking him with these 1/1s. And yeah, like I said, Retrofitter Foundry is so sick in these control mirror matches because, you know, it's basically like a Castle Ardenvale that's way, way cheaper to activate and can produce really big creatures as well. Wow, opponent just jams the 1 ring, so that makes me think they must have a second one because they knew about the Make Disappear, but that's really good for us because now we get to resolve Transmogrify. Unfortunately, we won't have enough mana to go for Transmogrify and hold open Make Disappear if we find another one off Atraxa, but even if the opponent does have another 1 ring here, which I imagine they must if they just jam that first one, I feel like we've got a really good chance to apply pressure here anyway because of the Atraxa. Okay, so we find another Transmogrify, definitely going to take a Mutavault here, and the second Transmogrify is kind of dead without this Volcanic Spite, but since the opponent doesn't have any creatures, I think I'm just going to take the second Make Disappear here instead, because if the opponent doesn't play any creatures, I guess we can Volcanic Spite our own creatures, but currently, you know, I don't think we really need the second Transmogrify. Okay, opponent has to go for the threat for Atraxa, but if we get to untap here, we have the Make Disappear up. We still have... Now we have 2 Retrofitter Foundry, so I'm not even sure we really need this second Transmogrify in order to win here. And if the opponent did have another 1 ring there, maybe they felt like they had to use Go for the Throat there to kill the Atraxa. Is my... You know, from how they've played it... For them to jam that first 1 ring, I feel like they must have had a second one or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. But either way, we now have 2 Retrofitter Foundries going, so... I feel like we're in a really, really solid position here. Right, typically Dimir is mainly relying on single target removal, and a lot of the builds I've seen are running like Yeheni's Expertise as their sweeper of choice, which the 4/4s from Foundry dodge, which is pretty important. Okay, opponent flashes in Bowmasters here. Probably going face. Oh wow, they target the 1/1. I mean, maybe they're trying to tap us out of Make Disappear mana here, potentially. Maybe they have a second Bowmasters. Either way, I'm still going to untap the Foundry and activate here, because that not only gives us another Thopter that we can turn into a 4/4 next turn, as opposed to it dying, but it also denies them the Orcs off the Bowmaster as well. Now, there is a good chance the opponent might have something else here, because they do tap us out of Make Disappear. But if they don't, we're in a really solid position, right? They only have a single Bowmasters in play. We have a 4/4 and a flying 1/1 that we can also turn into a 4/4. Shieldred's Edict, okay. So that's fine, I think. We've still got a 4/4 in play. The Bowmasters does turn off our Fiery Islets, which is a little bit annoying, but I don't think that's too much of an issue, to be honest. And since they're now tapped out, I think I can just go for... Oh, wait, okay. Wow, okay, that would have been a huge punt on my part. I completely forgot that I had the second Atraxa in the graveyard. So that would have just exiled my 4/4. Thankfully, the opponent just scooped it up, so I'm going to claim that was a really sick bluff by me, but I honestly just completely forgot. I mean, to be honest, I still think we're in a winning position, even if I do just exile my 4/4 there, but yeah, that was that was not the smartest move. But yeah, opponent obviously thought that, well, they didn't know that I had the second Atraxa in hand, so they just didn't think they could beat another Atraxa. But yeah, sideboarding in this matchup should be pretty simple, right? Normally against 1 ring decks, I tend to bring in all 4 Pithing Needles because I want the second one as backup in case the opponent has removal for the first one. But since we're against Dimir, which doesn't really have good ways to deal with artifacts once they resolve, I think we only need 3 here because, you know, we want to find the first one a decent amount of time, but drawing it in multiples isn't as important when they don't have a good way to deal with artifacts once they're in play, outside of stuff like Brazen Borrower, temporary answers to it. So yeah, outside of that, we just bring in the extra counter spells, bring in the negates and mystical disputes, and then we can just trim the removal, right? We still have Flame of Anor if they do have bigger creatures, but for the most part, we don't really care about their Bowmasters and Snapcaster Mages and stuff like that. We still have the Flame of Anors to deal with Shieldred, so yeah, just bringing the 3 Pithing Needles again. Like I said, if we're against Rakdos or Jund, where they have more clean answers to Pithing Needle, then I like bringing in all 4, but against Dimir, I don't really think you need more than 3 because they really struggle to deal with artifacts once they're in play. So this hand I'm happy to keep. Right, we've got the Retrofit Foundry, which is really, really good in these control mirror matches. As long as we can keep finding lands, I think we're fine. So I actually think I'm going to lead on Pithing Needle on turn 1 here, because since we have the backup Retrofit Foundry, I want to get Pithing Needle in play, naming the 1 ring, and then if they Thoughtseize, we have redundancy for the Retrofit Foundry, whereas if we lead on the Foundry and they Thoughtseize us and we lose the Pithing Needle, we're then potentially soft to 1 ring later in the game, and 1 ring is their best card in this matchup for sure. So we don't have a counterspell on turn 2. I don't think it's really worth bluffing, and make this appear. I'm not gonna play the second Foundry out though, just so that we have mana up for Mystical Dispute here though. If they tap out for a Narset or something, having an answer here is pretty important. Okay, so they do have the Thoughtseize here. It'd be interesting to see what they take, because I could see them taking the Foundry, I could see them taking the Transmogrify, maybe even the Trickery, but I feel with 2 counterspells, having redundancy, they're probably more interested in taking one of the other 2 cards. Because 2 Foundries does speed up our ability to pressure. Okay, they do take the Transmogrify, which, I think is fine. Again, that might imply that they've taken out a lot of their creature removal, though, because, like I said, this deck does put the opponent in an awkward spot where they really don't want to keep in creature removal against us, but they kind of have to for Transmogrify. I'm going to Flame of Anor here, which does play into Bowmasters, unfortunately, but I feel like hitting land drops is so important in this matchup, so okay, they bind to Secrecy, which is probably better than Bowmasters here. Okay, we do keep hitting land drops, which is, again, another big reason why I'm very high on 28 lands, because you do need to just keep hitting lands in the mirror match. So I was going to play out the second Foundry here, but I want to have access to Trickery plus Dispute, and if we do draw another land off the top, I can then just play the Foundry and still have them both up anyway. If I draw a non-land, then we have more gas in our hand anyway, so, I want to have access to both. And the opponent knows I have access to both as well, so they could have potentially gone for something if they knew that we were tapped out of both our counterspells. So we did draw land, so now we can go, we can attack, now run out the Foundry and still have access to Trickery plus Dispute to fight over the stack. Had they gone Shieldred plus Dispute, we'd be in a lot of difficulty at the moment if we didn't have access to both of the counterspells. Okay, so they changed the equation in the Retrofit Foundry, that's fine, right? We still have 1 Retrofit Foundry in play, which is the most important one. Second Foundry is nice, but it's definitely not worth fighting over, because again, with my current hand, I am very soft to Shieldred. Okay, yikes, we have to fight over the Pithing Needle here, though, I think, because Foundry is our only proactive play, and is very good in this matchup, so definitely going to fight over this one. Again, could be soft to Shieldred off the top, but I still think we can beat Shieldred with Retrofit Foundry, potentially. We can just keep blanking their attacks by chump blocking and then sacrificing our tokens in response. So it looks like the opponent's thinking about it, but they know we have the Dispute, so if they do have a counterspell, they might just know that we can stop them. They do have the Shieldred. But again, like I mentioned, I still think we can hold off this Shieldred fairly easily with the Retrofit Foundry. And, what the 2 life every single turn is like a 9-turn clock. We'll have found something by then, I'm sure. So we get to ship it back. Definitely going to hold back this 1-1, so if they do attack, we can just block and sack it in response. Which they do attack, so... And the nice thing about holding back the 1-1 here is, we're not racing in this matchup. We're going to win by grinding them out. Especially because they have the Shielded in play. So getting in for 1 damage, as opposed to, the alternative is... make a 1-1 with the Foundry, untap it, block, turn that 1-1 into a Thopter, and then we're tapped out of Mystical Dispute mana. So doing it this way is a lot better, because we can make a 4-4, blank the Shielded attack, and still have mana open for Mystical Dispute. So it looks like the opponent's in the tank here about something. But yeah, either way I feel pretty good. We can just continue to blank the Shieldred. If they don't do anything here, we can just untap the Foundry and make another 1-1, which we can then... use to do the same thing again next turn. Just chump block, sack it, turn it into a Thopter, and then we basically just don't need to worry about the Shieldred attacking us. And I think there's a good chance they might just hold the Shieldred back now anyway because we have the 4/4. So again, don't do anything, so we're pretty happy to use the Foundry here. Okay, they do fatal push the 4/4, but again, I'm pretty happy with that exchange, right? They're basically down a card because the Foundry just made that for us. You know, but we're not losing card advantage off this Foundry at all. Wow, okay, second Foundry is pretty nice. So definitely going to run that out. And again, you know, we obviously still have the Mirex here, but the Retrofitter Foundry is much, much more efficient at making tokens, and you can work your way up the chain. Plus, you obviously can't block with the Mirex tokens, which is not great when the opponent has a Shieldred in play. So opponent goes for Drowning the Lock. Again, you know, I'm not crazy about fighting over the second Retrofitter Foundry. The only reason I'm fighting over that is because I feel like Mystical Dispute, the value of it is getting way, way lower as the opponent gets access to more lands. So I don't think I'm going to get a better opportunity to use it than that spot. Okay, so yeah, opponent has stopped attacking with the Shieldred now, which is really nice. Now it means we don't have to play defensively with the Foundries anymore. But, I mean, we still have the option, right? So my game plan at this point is, you know, we're still on a 7-turn clock from the Shieldred's activated ability. Oh, sorry, the triggered ability. But, you know, we can fairly easily build up a big board in that time. Okay, so we draw a Seek New Knowledge, which is interesting. I think I'm not super interested in firing that off straight away, though. I'd much rather spend my mana on the Retrofitter Foundry and then see what we draw for next turn. Because if we do draw an Atraxa or a land, we can potentially use the Seek New Knowledge to cash that in for 2 better cards. Whereas if we just use the Seek New Knowledge... I mean, obviously if the opponent plays something that we want to counter, we can use Seek New Knowledge to try and dig towards a counter spell. But I'd rather take a draw step, see what I find first. So interesting, opponent uses Archmage's Charm to draw 2. I guess they feel at this point that stealing a Retrofitter Foundry probably isn't going to be good enough to get them back in the game. Although, I feel like if they had used the Archmage's Charm to steal one of my Foundries, I probably would have used Seek New Knowledge to try and dig for a counter spell. So maybe that was a misplay from the opponent. Obviously, very hard for me to say that without knowing what's in their hand, though. But I'm much happier that they chose to draw 2 instead of stealing the Retrofitter Foundry. So I'm going to preemptively untap the Foundry here, just so that the opponent can't flash in Bowmasters in response to the first Foundry activation, right, and kill the 1/1. By the way, one thing that's very, very important to do with this deck, if you are against a Bowmasters deck, is if you're planning on turning your if you're planning on turning your Servo into a Thopter and then turning your Thopter into a 4/4, you should go into full control mode, and then in response to turning your Servo into a Thopter, you untap the Retrofitter Foundry so the opponent doesn't have a point of interaction to kill your Thopter before you turn it into a 4/4, if that makes sense. Because if you don't go into full control and you turn your Servo into a Thopter, the opponent can flash in Bowmasters in response to you untapping the Foundry so that you can't turn your Thopter into a 4/4. Okay, so Brazen Borrow the 4/4. Again, not really too concerned about that. And I don't want to fire off the Transmogrify too early when they have mana open. If we can run them out of cards, then I'd be interested in doing that. So we could have used the Dispute on the Brazen Borrower there, but I think I want to use that to defend the Transmogrify. You know, we can trade with the Brazen Borrower using our Foundry tokens, right? We can turn this Servo into a Thopter to just block in the air. But yeah, maybe there's an argument to just using Dispute on the Borrower there, but since we can just block the Borrower in the air here, I think we're fine. Maybe it was greedy for me to attack with that 1/1 in the air, to be honest. I think these attacks might just be greedy, because like I said, we're not winning this by incremental damage while they have a Shieldred in play. And so maybe I'm supposed to just hold this 1/1 back. Yeah, so they push the 1/1. We turn it into a 4/4, but we... So yeah, I think I got greedy with the attacks. I'm probably supposed to just hold the 1/1 back, because now we probably have to let this 3 damage through, which is very risky when they have a Shieldred in play. So yeah, that was definitely a misplay. I got greedy with those attacks. So either way, I'll untap the Foundry. Okay, Arena's giving away that they don't have anything here, right? It's passing priority immediately, so I now know that I can just go for the Transmogrify. So we should be fine, I think. just going to tap the Mutavaults for mana here so that we have blue available for whatever we hit off the Atraxa. And again, this is another spot where if you're playing against this deck, it's really important to set stops or hold full control so that you don't give away that you don't have anything, because the only reason I'm going for Atraxa here or Transmogrify is because Arena was giving, leaking information that the opponent didn't have anything. So that was a pretty bad Atraxa hit, but I think getting the actual Atraxa in play is the most important thing here, right? And we do have double Mystical Dispute backup, so if they do have blue removal here, we should be alright. Yeah, okay, opponent just scoops it up, so we got there, nice. Okay, so we're going second tier. And yeah, I think we can keep this. Obviously having the Atraxa in hand is a little bit awkward, but we still have the second one in the deck, and we have Volcanic Spite to put this first one back as well, so... Oh, and Seek New Knowledge now as well, which is pretty nice. So I'm going to lead on the Fiery Islet now so that we can go Mutavault next turn to attack if we need to. Now, I doubt that's very likely with Make Disappear in hand, but, if they go Thoughtseize away the Make Disappear, I would want to be able to play the Mutavault here to be able to potentially attack down something like a Liliana, for example. And, the only downside of playing the Fiery Islet is we do take a little bit of damage using counter spells or Volcanic Spite. Wow, they do actually have the Liliana. So it looks like opponent's probably on green-black mid-range, unless they've just not found any red lands yet. But typically, Junda doesn't run basic forest, so we'll have to see, though. But either way, and also Woodland Cemetery is kind of a tell they might just be on straight green-black as well. But we might have just not seen the red yet. We'll see. Glissa, interesting. I mean, we can fairly easily deal with that with the Volcanic Spite, so we'll let that one resolve. Save our counter spells for stuff like the One Ring. So it gets Kill Glissa, drew Flame of Anor, which is really nice with this the Mutavault here. So I'm going to shock in the Steam Vents just in case we use the Mutavault. I guess we'd have to use the Fiery Islet regardless if we animate the Mutavault. But I'm just thinking, the Steam Vents in play means that, untapped means that we won't have to take damage off the Fiery Islet when we're using our red spells. Wow, Questing Beast is interesting. I guess that's to bypass the protection from the One Ring. But either way, we can animate the Mutavault here and then use Flame of Anor to deal 5 and draw 2, which is so sick when you can pull this off. So we get to kill the Questing Beast and draw 2, which is such a good exchange for us. Now we've got another Saruman's Trickery, so now we can pass with both Trickery and Make Disappear up, as well as Seek New Knowledge as well if we want to use that. Okay, opponent looks like they're just passing, so we'll fire off the Seek New Knowledge here, see what we find. Okay, Retrofit Foundry sick. Going to put back the Fiery Islet here, because I feel like we've got enough lands for the moment. And, with 28 lands in the deck, I feel like we're fairly likely to keep drawing more as well. So, I think we can afford to tap the Mutavault for the Retrofitter Foundry here because, if they're very unlikely to run any haste creatures outside of Questing Beast, so we won't, it's very unlikely that we want to use Mutavault as a blocker. If we wanted to use Mutavault to sack to the Retrofitter Foundry, we can still animate it even though it's tapped. Tear Asunder Heart. Okay, I feel like I probably want to fight over that because Retrofitter Foundry is my only proactive option here, really. I feel like we're way too reactive without it. Well, I guess we've got Mutavault as well, but the nice thing about using Trickery here... Oh, okay. I was going to say the nice thing about using Trickery here is then it also enables us to use Casualty on Make Disappear, but they also use the Fatal Push, so now we don't have Casualty. But them sacking the Peatland is good for us because that means they've got less mana to work with, right? They'd have to go... we can still counter Shieldred and the One Ring with Make Disappear. Okay, again, we could use Make Disappear on the Sunslayer, but with only 5 lands, I still feel like Make Disappear has value here, and we can obviously just use the Fiery Impulse instead, so going to try and be more mana efficient here, make a 1-1 off the Foundry when we have 2 mana available, and then we can just use Fiery Impulse during our turn. Wow, I mean, I'm very happy for them to use Fatal Push on my Foundry tokens. Either way, we can now just main phase the Fiery Impulse. I don't think there's much advantage on waiting, really, Very low chance they're running protection spells, but I might as well just fire it off now on the off chance that they are. Hive of the Eye Tyrant is potentially scary, but, we can just make tokens off the Foundry to block it if we need. So, going to use the Saruman's Trickery on the Liliana here, and then, now we've got a token in play for Casualty on Make Disappear if we need that. And now we should just start pulling ahead off the Retrofitter Foundry, I think. So, gonna use 2 mana to make a 1-1 here, start applying pressure on board. It is, you know, the opponent's deck is obviously teched out to beat the One Ring with like main deck Terra Sunder, which is obviously also good against the Retrofitter Foundry, but you know, the more turns that we can pass with the Foundry in play, even if they do have main deck answers, is really solid for us. Wow, they go for throat the token. I mean, this kind of highlights the real strength of this deck in that the opponent probably is incentivized. I mean, if they see Transmogrify this game, the opponent is incentivized to keep in their single target removal to fizzle our Transmogrifies, like their Fatal Pushes and stuff like that. And you can see from this game that if we don't have the Transmogrify and we're just, you know, relying on the Retrofitter Foundry to get there, the opponent's single target removal is really bad against us. So, you know, Transmogrify puts the opponent in a really awkward spot where they kind of need to keep in the spot removal to fizzle the Transmogrify, or if they're relying on, you know, black interaction, they've only got Thoughtseize and spot removal to stop Transmogrify. But if we're just winning off the back of the Retrofitter Foundry, it's really bad against us. So just keep making more tokens off the Foundry here. We can untap it and then turn one of these 1/1s into a Thopter, which we can then turn into a 4/4 next turn. And we've got the Volcanic Spite now to deal with the Hive of the Eye Tyrant, so we can freely attack with both here. Oh, and Fire Impulse now as well. So if the opponent does animate the Hive here, which I imagine they will, we can just cleanly deal with that. Then we don't have to worry about them using it to attack us. And it, you know, denies them an extra land as well. So if they do happen to top deck a Shieldred or a One Ring here, we can just counter it with Make Disappear without needing to casualty, which is pretty nice. But yeah, I feel pretty good. We've got most things on lock. We've got the counter spells here in case they do draw something good. So yeah, I feel pretty good about this spot. So we'll just keep activating the Retrofitter Foundry here. We can make a 2/2, untap it, and then just turn this 1/1 into a 4/4. Really start increasing the clock on the opponent here to close the game out. Okay, another land is fine. And honestly, this is another reason why I like going up on lands, because when you have a Retrofitter Foundry in play, you actively want more lands to get more activations off the Foundry as well. And then you can see how good the Fiery Islets are here as well. Just, you know, if we did need to draw for more gas, we have the option. It does make the opponent's Bowmasters better top decks, but you know, we're in a spot right now where we don't really care about Bowmasters at all. So let's see if the opponent drew anything good here. Okay, Inquisition. I mean, I feel like they take the trickery here regardless, so I might as well use it to just get an extra token into play. And then we still have access to the Make Disappear for next turn. Opponent doesn't really know what we've got. Since we are down to just to Make Disappear as counter spells, like, I'm going to cash in the Fiery Islet here. Okay, opponent just scoops that up. So that felt really good, obviously. So against these sorts of decks, I'm definitely going to bring in a couple of Pithing Needle. We didn't see the One Ring, but we did see Liliana at least. So I still think Pithing Needle is going to be good here. If we do see the One Ring next game, then I'm probably just going to cut the impulses for the full 4 Pithing Needles. But without seeing the One Ring, I think I'm only going to bring in a couple here. And I don't mind keeping in, you know, typically I don't like keeping in Fiery Impulse against Rakdos or GB Midrange, because typically their creatures start at the 3-drop slot. Obviously, they've got Bowmasters as well, but we're mainly interested in killing stuff like Jarsil and Crucius immediately. So Volcanic Spite is better because we don't need Spell Mastery to kill a Jarsil immediately. And they typically more creature-like, so I'll normally board out the 4 Volcanic Spite for 4 Pithing Needle. But against Golgari, I imagine they could potentially be running Tarmogoyf as well, which is another creature that we want to have access to Impulse to kill immediately, you know, before it grows really big. So, but if we do see the One Ring, I really like bringing in all 4 Pithing Needles against any One Ring deck, because they're likely to be bringing in Artifact Removal against us, especially if they see Retrofitter Foundry. So you really want that backup so that the opponent can't just go, you know, Haywire Might or Abrade your first Pithing Needle and then just immediately unlock the One Ring. You know, having that second backup copy is very valuable in these sorts of matchups. So if we do see the One Ring, I'll definitely go down to Impulse, bring in the full 4 Pithing Needle going into game 3. But it looks like the opponent, you know, they're running Questing Beast. I don't think they can afford to run that many 4-drops. So it looks like they're trying to tech out their mid-range deck to win the mirror match against other One Ring decks, which is, you know, an interesting take. But I think it should make, you know, we probably have a better matchup against them because of that. So here, going to put back the island just in case they're running Assassin's Trophy or Field of Ruin. You know, they could very well be running Assassin's Trophy. They didn't see Transmogrify last game though, so, you know, if they do have it in their sideboard, I don't know if they'd have brought it in against us. But either way, you know, this hand's pretty good, right? We've got Make Disappear for turn 2, Flame of the North for turn 3. We have a lot of potential token generators in the deck. So as long as we can find one of them, then Transmogrify becomes live as well. So pretty happy with this hand. Thankfully, no Thoughtseize. Mulliganing down to 6 against mid-range decks is always a bit risky, but, we can't keep a one-lander where Mutavault is our only land. So nothing from the opponent. Maybe they got Bowmasters. Yeah, okay. So they Bowmasters here. I think we have to let that go, With Flame of Anor in hand, I would quite like to get Bowmasters off the board, but, we can't risk disappearing that Bowmasters and then them just casting the One Ring or Shieldred, really. I mean, Shieldred's actually not a big issue because of Flame of Anor, but if we counter the Bowmasters and they resolve the One Ring, the game is really, really bad for us at that point. So, and we're not too worried about 2 1/1s. That's such a slow clock against us. So we can deal with the Bowmasters at a later point if we even need to deal with them. Okay, don't have the One Ring, but they do have Liliana. So very happy that I saved the Make Disappear there. Oh wow, okay, that's a sick draw. So now we have an extra counter spell and a token generator for our Transmogrify here, which is really solid. We do obviously need to be very wary about their removal, though. If they did keep him push against us, which the opponent might not keep him fatal push against us because they didn't see Transmogrify game 1. But they could obviously have Bowmasters, which can fizzle Transmogrify on a Trickery token. So opponent has Pithing Needle. Yeah, they named the Retrofit Foundry, so I think we'll just use the Flame of Anor to kill the Pithing Needle, because, we do want our Foundries to be live going forwards. Okay, Make Disappear is pretty sick here because we can potentially get them to tap out if they try and cast 2 spells this turn with our counter spells. And if we do resolve Trickery this turn, we can potentially go Transmogrify with Make Disappear back up if we draw another land here. So opponent cracks the Fabled Passage. Well, I mean, we kind of actively want them to cast stuff here. We want to try and tap them out for Transmogrify if we can. Oh, wow, okay. So Thrun is obviously really bad for us, but I think as long as I think we still get a token if we activate the Trickery here. Obviously, it won't counter the Thrun. Okay, good. So we got the 1/1 token. I feel like the only way we're beating Thrun is with Atraxa. And thankfully, we can just Transmogrify here uncontested. Wow, we only get 2 cards off it, which isn't great. So I think we're in real trouble here if the opponent has Go for the Throat, because we will have Make Disappear up this turn, but we won't have Casualty. To Casualty, we'd obviously have to sacrifice the Atraxa, which defeats the whole point. We can play around Liliana, though. If they have Liliana, we can animate Mutavault to dodge the minus. So we just need to fade exactly like Go for the Throat or Heartless Act this turn. Okay, so go for Questing Beast. I think I'm happy to Make Disappear that. If they had an extra land, I feel like they would have played it beforehand. So we don't need to worry about Go for Throat or Heartless Act. So we get to untap with the Atraxa, which is huge. And now we have Trickery back up. And obviously we have the 2 Transmogrifies in hand as well. So even if they do somehow kill the Atraxa, we can go Trickery into backup 1 here. Thoughtseize is a bit awkward. I think I'm going to Trickery that. We could obviously let it go, but I think the opponent is just going to take the Trickery anyway, so we might as well use the Trickery here just to get a 1/1 token. If we only had 1 Transmogrify, I think there's a decent chance they take that instead, but with 2, I'm pretty confident they just take the Trickery there, so we might as well just counter it in response. But yeah, I feel like, if they had Go for the Throat or Heartless Act, they would have used it last turn, so... Shieldred, okay. I mean, we should still be running the race here for sure. Unfortunately, we can't really cash in the Fiery Islets with the opponent having both Shieldred and Thrun here, but I still feel like we should be good to win the race, right? Even if they start attacking with Shieldred here, we're gaining 7 a turn. They're only gaining 2. So, I still feel like we're in a really good position here. If they do find a removal spell for the Atraxa, and they force us to block with the 1/1, we can still animate the Mutavault and Transmogrify during our turn. Okay, another Questing Beast. I mean, again, we should still win the race here. Even if they attack with Questing Beast and Shieldred here, we should still be good. Wow, they don't attack with the Shieldred. That's really good for us. So we're definitely still winning the race here. Another land isn't great. So we are flooding out pretty badly here, but I still think we're, probably an odds-on favourite to win, right? They need to find a removal spell for Atraxa this turn, or we just win with the next attack. Or I guess if they found the 1 ring, that would also be really bad, but they're running Shieldred and Questing Beast. I feel like they can't be running that many more 4-drops, right? Like I said, I think their deck looks like it's teched out to beat One Ring decks rather than running it itself. So if they don't have the One Ring, I feel like we're pretty good here, right? Even if they do find a Heartless Act or go for the Throat, we can just Transmogrify for another Atraxa next turn. So they can plus the Liliana to get one out of our hands. Okay, they choose to minus, we'll just sack the Orc here. I didn't really want to animate Mutavault unless we really need to. Okay, they thought see Transmogrify. We should just be good to win now then. Only got 1 green mana spare, so just need to obviously not block their Death Touch creatures here. So do attack him with everything. With only a green mana, I mean, we could lose to a pump spell here, but Arena's kind of giving away they don't have anything. Yeah, sweet, we got there, nice. Okay, so we're going seconds here. And I can't keep a one-lander, unfortunately. Gonna have to ship this one back. Wow, another one-land. Okay, gotta go to 5, which isn't ideal. So gonna put back the Fiery Islet, and I think this isn't great on the draw, right? Having nothing before turn 3, but I think this is giving us the best chance to win, right? If the opponent has a slow draw, you know, the way to recover from a multi 5 is potentially go counter on turn 3 with Trickery into Transmogrify. And I feel like having lands is really important. Okay, so looks like the opponent's on control. Lurrus control, if I had to guess. You know, the only other blue-black Lurrus deck that I ever really see is Ninjas, potentially. Oh, wow. Okay, very happy to see Mirrex. Mirrex is at its best in these sort of control mirror matches. Okay, so opponent has Bowmasters, which is fine. Not too worried about that. And I'm happy for them to fire out their Bowmasters now rather than use it on the Transmogrify. The annoying thing is with Trickery here is that the opponent is unlikely to tap out during their turn, right? So Trickery is probably going to be used during the end step, but since we have Mirrex, we can just use our mana every single turn. It looks like the opponent's missing land drops here as well. Okay, so the second Bowmasters, I think I'm going to Trickery this. Slows down their clock because they're missing land drops mainly. And it also gets the 1-1 in play, so if they do tap out here... okay, they thought he's away to Transmogrify, but thankfully we still have the Mirrex. So this Mirrex is going to be clutch in this matchup, I think. Especially if the opponent keeps missing land drops, which looks like they probably have missed again, because I feel if they had Thoughtseize, they probably would have used it last turn. So I'm going to take the trade here. Normally I wouldn't like doing that because it means any of their future Bowmasters get them a new creature in play. And we obviously want a token in play for future Transmogrifies, but with Mirrex in play, we don't really need to worry about that. If I didn't have Mirrex, I definitely wouldn't take the trade there. But since we do, we have a steady stream of tokens here anyway. Okay, so opponent finds their third land off the Lorien revealed. Presumably they shook this in. Yeah, okay, so they're holding up interaction, which makes sense. Okay, opponent attacks. I mean, honestly, since we're ahead on lands, we have lands to spare here. I'm just going to fire up the Mutavault. Because if they want to use a piece of removal, we have... You know, we potentially represent using Transmogrify. Oh, wait, I thought we also had mana available. Oh, yeah, sorry. So the Mutavault had Summoning Sickness, so we couldn't use it for the Mirrex there. So had I known that... Actually, no, I still think I'm happy to use the Mutavault there. It gets rid of the Bowmasters, which then makes future draws like Flame of Anor a lot better. But I still think I'm just going to pump mana into Mirrex here, right? Save the Flame of Anor for a potential shielded later, or, you know, when we really need to draw to, we can use it. You know, it's kind of a disaster if we just fire off Flame of Anor and they happen to have, like, another Bowmasters, right? If they flash it in response, then we've got to deal with 3 direct damage, a 1-1, and a 3-3, so... But yeah, while we've got the Mirrex, just going to keep pumping mana into that. So Deluge, we obviously could counter that, but I think I would rather hold on to the Trickery for a high impact card because, you know, say they Deluge and they have like 2 1 rings or something, or they hit, you know, they just happen to have a 1 ring in hand. We're out of counter spells at that point, so I think we let the Deluge resolve and then save the Trickery for a high impact card. But in the meantime, we can just keep pumping mana into the Mirrex here, which is pretty sick. And then we could obviously go for Flame of Anor, but I don't really feel like it's worth it, right? As things currently stand, the opponent's not really using their mana that efficiently, and we're just making 1-1s every single turn. And the poison counters from these Mythic tokens can add up pretty quickly as well, so I don't think there's really pressure for us to fire off these Flame of Anors right now. Okay, Sauron's Ransom. It's an interesting split here. I think ideally we want them to try and pick the face down pile here. If we give them 2 lands in the face up pile, they're just going to pick the face down one regardless. So if we give them Island Snapcaster Mage, I think there's, it's not unlikely they might choose to pick the Snapcaster. I'm just trying to think the land that is likely to make them pick the face down cards the most. And I think Island is probably the one, right? Wow, they do go for the face down one, so that's obviously sick for us. I mean, they were kind of looking for lands anyway, right? So they do have lands now, but I feel like they've, from how they've played, they're hitting their land drops now, so... okay, so main deck Pithing Needle is interesting. I guess they just named them Mirex, but we have Flame of Anor to just deal with that immediately, so we don't need to worry about that. Plus, we can also animate the Mutavault in order to draw 2. So we can go animate Mutavault, Flame of Anor, destroy Pithing Needle, and draw 2. And we can even do that twice, so if they have a counterspell for the first one, we can just do it again, right? Okay, they do shock in a Watery Grave though, so that does potentially represent 2 counterspells, but I still think I'm just going to go for it here. Fire up the Mutavault, and then we can go destroy the Pithing Needle, draw 2. Again, they can have Bowmasters here, which would be a little bit rough, but I feel like they're more incentivized to counter the Flame of Anor if they do have both. And we've already seen 2 Bowmasters as well, so chances aren't that high. Okay, they do have an Archmage's Charm. I think we're just going to fire off the second Flame of Anor here, save our counterspell for a proactive play from the opponent. I guess then we don't have to worry about the One Ring at all because they're running Lurrus, but they still do have probably some high impact plays. Okay, so they fire off Cut Down on Mutavault. That's completely fine, though. We still have the Mirex. Mirex is back online, and we drew another Mutavault here. So now we can potentially use Mutavault plus Flame of Anor again if they have another Pithing Needle or if they play a creature. But since they're running Lurrus, I think the only things we really need to worry about here are their creature lands, Snapcaster Mage, and Orcish Bowmasters. But yeah, I feel in a really good spot. Mirex is basically single-handedly won us this game. So Yenne's Expertise, not too worried about that. If they play something impactful off the free spell here, then we can obviously counter that instead. But them just using 4 mana to kill 2 of our tokens is completely fine. Obviously, you could make an argument to maybe countering that to keep applying pressure, but having that happen and then not being able to counter something more high impact seems like a much worse situation for us. I'd much rather just let the 2/1/1s die and just we can rebuild to that board state in 2 turns fairly easily anyway. So activate the Mirex here, get another 1/1 token. Okay, get a Fiery Islet as well, which is nice. That's just something that we can cycle if we want. So we attack here, puts them down to 8 and 6 poison counters. So opponent's getting low on both life total and on the poison counters right now. So they have to do something here, or they're just going to die to these Mirex tokens pretty soon. I mean, they do have the Hive, but we have the Fiery Impulse to kill that if they do fire it up as a blocker. So I'm going to activate the Mirex here. And then, again, we could Flame of Anor, we could Fiery Islet, but I feel like we have the advantage here, right? The onus is on the opponent to do something, so I don't really want to, activate Fiery Islet or cast Flame of Anor for them to just have the opportunity to Bowmasters, for example. Okay, so they do have Snapcaster Mage, so what were they likely to take here? They could go Archmage's Charm to steal 1 or Cut Down to just kill 1. Either way, I think I'm happy to just let that resolve, right? We have Fiery Impulse to kill the Snapcaster Mage to, stop them blocking. Okay, they do go for Cut Down, which gives them more mana available to cast more stuff this turn. Hold open counterspells maybe. I'm just going to Fiery Impulse the Snapcaster Mage here so they can't block. Keep one of our 1/1s in play. Potentially put them down to 7 life, 7 poison counters. Wow, they bind to Secrecy. I mean, I'm pretty happy to see that. So they do have the extra card off the spellbook here. I'm going to let that resolve first. Just so they have less information, right? If we Fiery Impulse, there's a chance they might get a different card off the spellbook. So yeah, we kill the Snapcaster Mage. They do get a card off the spellbook, but thankfully most of the cards off the Bind Secrecy spellbook aren't that impactful, particularly from a control deck. But yeah, they're down 7 life on 7 poison counters. Naga Oracle. Oh, that must be off the spellbook, right? I mean, that does give us a good target for the Flame of Anor, so I'm kind of glad that I was sandbagging this, right? We can go animate Mutavault, kill the Oracle, and draw 2 here as well. And also have counterspell backup. So I'm going to go for it now, just in case, you know, we don't want them to potentially counter this with a counter that they draw off the cycle. So I'm gonna fire it off now, so they're less likely to have a counterspell. Okay, Foundry's a really nice draw here, so we get to pull that off, which pulls us so far ahead. When you get to pick both modes of Flame of Anor, it's such a blowout for the opponent. And they push the Mutavault. Again, I don't really care about that much, right? I want to just ensure that we can defend our winning position with the trickery at this point. You know, we don't want to... You know, plus the Mutavault's not that important right now. We can keep making tokens for Transmogrify off the Mirrex, and, you know, we've already gone through 3 Flame of Anors, so... Plus, we don't really need, you know, Retrofit Foundry is good on its own. You don't need to really use Mutavault with it. Not in this matchup anyway. But yeah, I feel pretty good about this spot. Okay, so opponent puts Lurrus into hand, and they do just cast Lurrus here. So I think I'm just going to Casualty Make disappear here. You know, obviously when the opponent's at 8 poison counters, there's maybe an argument to using a Foundry token instead, but I think Foundry tokens are generally more useful because we can, you know, they're less vulnerable to interaction, particularly Bowmasters, because we can sack in response to move it further up the chain. So we get to counter the Lurrus. I don't know if that was a misclick from the opponent, but they obviously shouldn't have paid the 2. Okay, they just scoop it up. I mean, I think we're just winning in that spot anyway. So in this matchup, I mean, typically against Dimir without Lurrus, I'd like bringing in Pithing Needle for the 1 ring. Obviously, with Lurrus, we know they're not running the 1 ring, so I think we just want the counter spells in here, like Negate, Mystical Dispute, and then probably just trim on some of the creature removal. You know, we don't necessarily need... I don't mind keeping in a couple of Impulse here to be able to, you know, pick off Bowmasters, kill their Hive of the Eye Tyrants potentially, but... Typically, the creature removal isn't that important here because their creatures are so small and generally low impact. But yeah, I feel pretty good about this matchup overall. I think particularly Retrofit Foundry, or as we saw last game, Mirrex, these repeatable token generators that give you something good to do with your mana if the opponent doesn't do anything you want to interact with, really helps to pull you ahead. You know, like I said, if you can resolve a turn 1 Foundry against these sorts of decks, the only real way to beat that is Archmage's Charm, and... For them to do that, you know, for them to have a window to do that, they often have to do it during their end step in response to you activating the Foundry, which then gives you a window to Flame of Anor it, or, you know, if you've got Mystical Dispute open, you can still counter it that way. So, Foundry is not just great in the deck in general, but it's so good in these mirror matches. Okay. I mean, against the Thoughtseize deck, I really don't like mulliganing, but I don't think we can keep that one. We can keep this one, though, and obviously going to put back the Attract, so we actively want that in the deck. So opponent does have the turn 1 Thoughtseize, which is a bit rough. Presumably they... well, I don't know, maybe they take the Transmogrify here. But I think they're more likely to take Seek New Knowledge, because then we're left without any plays until turn 4. But we do just top deck the Retrofitter Foundry, which, like I said, is really, really good in this matchup. So, I mean, there's a chance the opponent just starts playing stuff during their main phase while they know we don't have any counter spells, but just through Mystical Dispute, so... You know, next time we will have counter spells back online again. And this Transmogrify, we do have the Mutavault here. We also obviously have the tokens from the Retrofitter Foundry to use with the Transmogrify as well. So, yeah, feeling pretty good about this spot already. And we don't have to worry about Archmage's Charm here either, because they obviously don't have triple blue yet. Okay, Bowmasters is a little bit annoying, but again, you know, all of the extra draw effects in our deck are optional. We don't really have to worry about any additional triggers unless we really want to use Flame of Anor or Fiery Outlet or, you know, Volcanic Spite, but we've cut that. Okay, another tap land. So opponent still doesn't have Archmage's Charm mana here, which is pretty important. So we could obviously make a 1/1 token. We could also animate the Mutavault here to kill the Bowmasters. But like I said, I don't really care too much about it, and I don't want to risk them, like, you know, us tapping out and then them resolving like a Liliana or something weird like that. I'd much rather just hold the counter spell open and then make the token afterwards, just to be safe. So we can ship it back here. Still got Dispute up, still got Foundry up, also got Sokenzan now as well, which is pretty nice. Okay, they do flash in the Bowmasters here. They target the token. I mean, I'm pretty happy to just use a mana here to turn it into a Thopter. denies them the extra amass on the Orc token, which is pretty nice. And then we do have the option of untapping and turning it into a 4/4, but again, I think I'm just going to take the hit if they do attack with everything, and, you know, hold open the Mystical Dispute for something they might cast main phase 2. But we'll see if they attack here. Yeah, they do. Okay. That also just signals to me they want me to tap out here, so I think I'm just going to play it slow. We can afford to take the 3 here, and then if they don't do anything, we can still just untap the Foundry and turn this 1/1 into a 4/4. Obviously, if they have another Bowmasters, that's kind of rough. They can flash it in response to me untapping here to kill the Thopter token, but I'm alright with that. You know, we can still beat that, I think, especially with the Sokenzan and the Retrofitter Foundry. Okay. They Archmage's Charm the Thopter. I mean, I'm kind of surprised they didn't Archmage's Charm the Foundry, but I guess they're trying to, you know, they're trying to play a tempo game here, I guess, trying to attack us down and apply pressure, which does make sense, right? We're going to have to play quite defensively now. We are on a 3-turn clock, so... I mean, thankfully we have the Saruman's Trickery, so... And we can also preemptively make the token here. Now we have 5 mana. Just trying to think what lands we want to hold open here. I think we're just going to fire off the Foundry now, and then we can still Trickery... Actually, I think I'm going to activate the Mutavault, because if they do have a removal spell for the Mutavault here, we can just turn it into a 4/4. Yeah, so they fire off Fatal Push. We can turn Mutavault into a 4/4 here, which is much better than the 1/1, because we're just losing a token otherwise. Now we have a blocker for the Bowmasters that's going to stick around for later turns, right? And then we still have mana open for Trickery or Dispute if we need it. So opponent's thinking about casting something else here. Okay, so the Archmage's Charm, I think I'm going to Dispute that now, because Dispute, you know, as the game goes on, does become worse. It's approaching the point where, you know, they can potentially start paying if they draw more lands. Wow, they have a Dispute of their own, so I'm very glad that we held the Trickery here as well. So now we can Trickery. Now we have 2 blockers, so we can take out both of their Bowmasters. And now the clock's completely flipped on its head, right? Now we have 5 power in play, they only have 2. And we can also, obviously, Transmogrify now that they're tapped out. So, I think I'm going to use Transmogrify on the Mutavault. That does, you know, cut us off an extra land, but the 4/4 is pretty high impact in terms of just racing here, right? Now the opponent needs 2 removal spells to flip the race on its head. So we get a Mutavault here. I think Negate is probably better than Make Disappear while they have 5 lands. But yeah, I feel pretty good about this spot. Even if they top like a removal spell for Atraxa here, we still have the token. Wow, which they do. So very glad that we used Transmogrify on the Mutavault rather than the 4/4, because otherwise we would just have nothing left in play. So that's obviously a good draw for the opponent, and kind of unfortunate for us that we only hit 2 cards off the Atraxa, but I still think we're ahead here. Okay, Fiery Impulse is a nice one as well. I think we can definitely attack here, right? Because we can Fiery Impulse the flyer if we want. Or we can, you know, just let the 1/1 in the air hit us, and then we've got Mutavault to block on the ground as well. So they put Lurrus into hand. I think I'm going to save the Fiery Impulse for Lurrus potentially. Oh, wow, okay. Opponent just scoops it up. We were definitely ahead of there, so it makes sense.